Do you hear that? Me neither. It's Labor Day and I'm the only one dumb enough to be here. So we'll start off with, just out of curiosity, do your neighbors complain about you making noise, dining straight pipe cars as much as you complain about them making noise? Seems hypocritical. So I obviously could care less about the noise that these other shops are making. There's 3 performance shops in this building, and then there's 2 other shops that work on motorcycles. And on this side of the wall right here is actually just a general repair shop. And they probably make more noise than I do. I'm pretty sure that their method of testing cars is literally to start them up and then just hold them on the rev limiter like they're trying to blow them up. It's kind of weird. But everybody in this building kind of, we all get along. I've welded something for, I'm pretty sure, every shop in here. Even the dirt bike shop that makes more noise than anybody in the world. They're over here hanging out, BSing. We're all cool. Again, I weld stuff for them. Transmission shop over here. I absolutely hate this building, more so where it is than the building itself. Kind of in the hood, and there's a bunch of stuff associated with that I don't really like being around. But when I leave this building, I'm actually going to be a little bit bummed to leave this dude over here. He's been here for like 35 years and he's awesome. But a lot of you guys take a lot of this stuff way too seriously. Basically, everything is kind of joking around, making the best out of situations. And as far as complaining about the noise, it's just the irony of you press the record button and then all of the noise always seems to start. I obviously could care less that they're pulling cars out of their shop. I mean, come on. The dirt bike guys, on the other hand, there is an element of using the parking lot as a racetrack, and then, again, these guys are pulling cars in and out of their shop. They're working, riding wheelies for 4 hours straight in a 2-stroke dirt bike with methanol, and 6 different people are all hopping on and riding, taking turns, and all of this other stuff. Like, maybe that's kind of crossing the line. But I think basically, other than the owner of that shop, I think all of the employees and stuff have all kind of been fired, quit, whatever. So almost all of that has come to an end. So it's actually a lot more peaceful around here. But yeah, that's basically been an ongoing joke for the last 3 years. Stock command turbo, it will idle fine, but the second I give it any throttle, it dies. So these kind of questions can be a little bit tricky to answer just because there could be 75 different causes for this. But usually, when they spit and sputter, that'll be like there's too much fuel. And when they just die and shut off, that usually means that they're really lean. So the first thing you always want to check is fuel pressure. Anybody installing an EFI system without a fuel pressure sensor, I think you've bumped your head. You definitely want to do that. And then outside of that, just make sure the main fuel table is proper, and then you can always give it some acceleration enrichment. Usually things seem to want the most acceleration enrichment right off of idle, so kind of right in that area that you are describing, but more often than not, if it takes a whole bunch of acceleration enrichment right off of idle, it probably needs more fuel in the main fuel table. So sometimes you kind of have to find that balance. Also, make sure the TPS sensor is reading correctly. Holley's pretty good about having to do the TPS auto set, but I see it on the Hondas and stuff all the time where they'll do exactly what you're explaining, and then you'll find that the TPS sensor isn't working, or seen guys wire them backwards. I've basically run across every single problem that you can think of in that regard, but my assumption would be that it's running lean. And then obviously you can look at your wideband data and see if that's what the case is. But then I've even seen like more extreme examples where you have a ground wire that's making a good enough connection when the engine's stationary and at idle, but you rev it and then I don't know, I guess it kind of rattles itself loose and then it'll do all kinds of dumb stuff, and then there's 150 things in between. But my first assumption would be it's probably running lean, and you got to figure out why that is. And with fuel pressure, you can verify that it's not mechanical, and then you can dig into the tune side of it. But if you try to chase the tune side of it before verifying that it's correct mechanically, you could run around circles until you drop dead. If weren't to have a default setting for Terminator O2 sensor failure, what would you do? I think limit RPM to 3,000 and retire timing by 3 degrees. So I'm guessing, I don't know if I'm reading that 100% correctly, but I'm guessing that you're asking about like a safety for when the O2 goes bad and what you should do. A couple of different ways to think about that. Like I've probably tuned, like all exaggerating aside, like 10 times more cars just running completely open loop than I have before all of this like full-time closed loop stuff was even sort of available. If it was me personally, I don't really necessarily care too much about the O2 dying. I would say I keep all my closed loop limits and stuff really, really tight. So even if the sensor does go down, the car is going to run just fine. And there's kind of two trains of thought as far as a safety net for the car running lean and damaging itself. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if you try to set up safeties as regard of being lean, then if the sensor dies and it pegs lean, then you're going to trigger all of those safeties. So I guess it depends on kind of what and how you're using your car for. Obviously nobody wants their car to blow up, but it seems like the safeties almost do more harm than good a lot of times, especially on like race cars. Because, you know, if you're got a grudge race lined up for 10 grand and your O2 sensor dies halfway through the track and your safeties shut the car down, then you're gonna be pretty upset when you go back and look at the data and figure out why you just lost that 10 grand. But if it's a car that you drive every day, then maybe that's the case. But with the newest updates in the Terminator X software, if the sensor pegs all the way lean for X amount of time, then it basically ignores that data and everything goes back to normal. So I think for me, more so than wanting to like implement a limiter and pull in timing and those things, I would more so just want to know that it's actually happening. And at that point you can kind of make your own decision on whether you want to get out of it or whatever. Sometimes there's an element of danger associated with some of these like real low rev limiters and stuff. Like if you're pulling out into traffic and all of a sudden you have this rev limiter at 3,000 RPM and you get blasted in the rear end by a tractor trailer, like I'd rather lose an engine than lose my life. So I'm a little hesitant with a lot of that stuff, but I like warning lights and things of that nature. So, you know, whether you have a Pro Dash or just an LED in the car or something, you could set up some criteria based off of that, but it's totally personal preference. But I use a lot of the safeties with caution, just because you got to think of all of the situations in which the safeties could kick in and potentially cause problems. The toy machine knuckle tat is nostalgic. Yeah, that's good times there. Back at that point in life, there was no problems. You just do what you needed to do. I don't even remember age-wise what that was like. Entry-level jobs or high school or something like that, and then yeah, you wait till you got off school or you got to work and you grab your skateboard and you went and hung out with all your friends and you didn't have a care in the world. I miss those days. Does spark plug wire length matter? Cheapo header, stock coil location, cut the length wires. So some spark plug wire expert guy might be able to give you some mathematical formulas. I think that there's probably a point where it matters. Like if you mounted the coils in the trunk, that could probably be problematic. But I've seen wires as long as, you know, one side of the engine bay to the other, and it seems to work just fine. More importantly than the wire length, it seems to be the routing of the wires. We had a car years ago, this was a Honda way back when, and we changed plugs on it pretty frequently. And one time the car would run just fine and make, you know, 800-900 horsepower, whatever it was at that point in time. And then you'd like check the plugs, put the plugs back in, and make another run, and the thing would just misfire like crazy. And it turned out the way that the coil was mounted, and it had a 90-degree boot on the coil wire. And if you twisted the coil wire like 90 degrees or even up, it would pull the actual wire away from the radiator hose. But if you twisted that coil wire to where it was pointed down to where it looked the nicest, the wire rested on the coolant hose and the thing would misfire every single time. So we found that the fix was just you rotate that wire by 90 degrees and all of the problems went away. And then I've also seen similar stuff when you guys that have like 800 spark plug wires all bunched together and zip tied together and just this big ball of mess. They seem to like want to arc and jump and do weird things there. So the short answer is I don't think the length matters within reason, but how you route them seems to be more important, at least on, you know, what I've seen. Other people very well may have had different experience there. Is there a video on how to update from a V2 to V3 Terminator X Max? I hear people crashing their ECUs by not doing it properly. So this is an interesting one. So basically the process is the same between V2, V3, or any of the firmware updates. And even with the snipers, kind of the same. The HPs and Dominators are maybe a little bit different because most people aren't using the 3.5-inch screen to do the firmware updates, they're just doing it directly. But I see a lot of people having a lot of problem with this, and I just, honest to God, I don't understand what they're doing differently than what I'm seeing. Just yesterday, I updated firmware on we got a 50-something Corvette over here, and just simply plugged my USB cable into the laptop. Saw that the software that I was using was there was a conflict with the firmware that was in the ECU. So I simply went up to the update firmware tab. I clicked on it. I clicked on the firmware that I wanted. I waited 3 minutes and then the firmware was updated. And it's just that simple. But you see a lot of other guys, and I know a lot of other tuners personally that like refuse to try to do a firmware update through the laptop, and they want to do all of it through the handheld. And I do keep a handheld here just in case you ever get that situation where the ECU does break, and you can always, not always, I've never had one that I wasn't able to fix using the handheld. So the big thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that there's no splitters and there's nothing else plugged in, and you're just plugging your cable directly into the laptop. And make sure the battery voltage is good. If you want to be super anal about it, you can even put like a charger or jump box or something on it to make sure that the voltage stays up. Make sure all of the other programs and everything on the computer are off, and that you only have your Holley software open that you're using, not any, you know, a lot of times on my computer I'll have like Terminator X software open and HP and Dominator software open at the same time because I'm bouncing around between cars and different things. So close down everything other than what it is that you're using, and it always just works for me, knock on everything. And then if you are using the handheld, you can do the firmware update through the SD card. You basically need to save your tune first if you have something that you're already working with, and then delete everything off of the SD card and then re-upload everything onto the card. I think Holley actually has a video showing you how to do that way. Within my course, I show how to do the firmware updates using the laptop, and I can't remember if I've actually made a video on how to do it with the SD card. With that being said, I need to go and check that, because if not, I need to add that. So constantly adding videos to that all of the time. So yeah, I really don't know what people are doing to have these crashes. I don't know if it's a Windows thing or a laptop thing or what, but I've been fortunate enough to not have to deal with too much of that. And people assume I'm like a huge computer nerd, but I'm not at all. So for those of you that don't like doing firmware updates and things like that and sorting through all these files and folders in your computer, I'm not too far behind you. I've gotten a little bit better with the file management stuff just because I have so many different things going on, but I feel like if you wanted to talk computer specs to me, you might as well just be talking in Chinese. If a sniper, my data logs look like Etch-a-Sketch. So this is a fairly common problem. It seems to happen the most on the snipers, more on the Terminator X's, and very rarely does it happen on the HPs and Dominators in my experience. So the first thing to do is, if you are logging on the actual SD card on the handheld, then it kind of eliminates it being a computer problem out of the scenario. But if you are logging on your laptop and having this issue, the easiest thing to do is to try a different USB port on the computer. Probably won't fix anything, but it's kind of always worth a shot. The next thing you can do is actually try another computer. I've seen the computer itself be the problem, but assuming that it's not the computer and you're using the SD card, it's almost always a wiring noise problem. I have seen spark plug wires cause it. I have seen the way that spark plug wires are routed cause it, just like I was kind of explaining just a minute ago. I have seen non-resistor spark plugs cause it. I've seen just poor wiring, poor grounding cause it. But the fix almost always seems to be kind of in the engine bay. Anybody who has any other solutions or fixes that they've come across, I'd love to hear it, just because we can all learn from each other when it comes to this stuff. But I've taken my computer from a car that was having this exact problem and then plugged it into, you know, the next car the same day, and all of those problems were gone. So it seems to be more isolated to the car than the computer or the system or whatever. Gotta ask, was that you or a service texting me yesterday? So I'm not exactly sure who this is, but on my website we have a chat service for people who have questions about the course, and it's rare, but occasionally I'll send out a text message kind of everybody whenever we have some sort of a new update, or maybe a sale, or an offer is about to expire or something along the lines of that. So yeah, the initial message typically will go out to a bunch of people. If you send a message on the chat directly, it's kind of like it's a text message to a number, but it goes to my computer. It's not obviously my personal cell phone number. But just the other day we sent out one of the more mass messages, and I probably personally responded to over 100 messages. So yeah, I try and be pretty hands-on and active with this stuff when I can, but you got to understand there's only so many hours in the day and I'm one person, so I can't talk to everybody for 9 hours straight. Oh, here's another one. I wonder what the neighbors say when you're tuning an engine. So again, we all kind of get along whenever we have something cool on the dyno. Basically everybody comes over, asks questions, talks, hangs out, works, whatever. I absolutely understand that I am king of the parking lot when it comes to being annoying as shit. I get that, I understand that, and I apologize to everybody. Again, the noise only, it's just more of a joke. I don't understand why that's so hard to understand. And when you're filming and there's that noise, you have to just shut the camera off, and then you have to wait for the noise to stop before you start filming again. All these microphones and stuff, they don't just pick up on whatever noise is closest. They'll try and focus in on what it thinks is the most important, and 9 times out of 10, it actually will pick up on the noise that they're making and not what my stupid ass is saying. Oh, the transmission shop over here, there's actually, I don't think it's a customer, I think it's one of the guy's friends. And this guy's voice, he sounds like DMX on steroids.
I met DMX and he really talked like that. We in a restaurant, he, hell bitch, here's a water and some lemon. Why are you hollering?
He has the deepest, like loudest, most carrying voice I've ever heard. So through the brick wall and then through this wall here, my microphone will only pick up on his voice. So when he comes around, it's kind of, it makes it impossible for me to film anything. And with all of this noise stuff being said, like the last video that I filmed, I left my house at 5 a.m. so that I could get here, and I filmed that video and a few other ones. But I try and get here when they're not here, or sometimes I'll come in late because they usually leave around 2 over there now. So I'll try and start filming stuff after they leave. So again, it's all just an ongoing joke. Don't take everything so damn seriously. What is the max learn correction you like to see? So there's some cars that just don't really cooperate for several different reasons, and those are kind of the exception. But if we take a car that runs good, it listens to what you're telling it to do, it responds to what you're trying to tell it to do. Anything more than maybe like 3 to 5%, I'll start making changes. But I found if you start trying to chase like more than 3 or 5%, you'll do one of these deals. Because, you know, one day you might have a +3 correction, the very next day you might have a -3 correction. So as long as we're in that ballpark, I'm okay. And if we get over like 10%, if I get over 10% on something that I've tuned, a lot of times I'll start investigating to make sure that nothing with the car itself changed, and just do like a health check, make sure everything's good to go. But yeah, for, you know, like I say, 3 to 5%, I'm okay with that. And on a lot of stuff that I tune to, it depends on what it is and scenarios and the customer and whatever else, but a lot of times I'll actually turn the learn off. So in that case, you have a 0% learn. So you don't have to worry about it too much at that point. But again, I've tuned so many cars just full-blown open loop that the learn is more of just like a luxury. I don't rely on it for anything. What are your thoughts on the 6L80 controller? That's a very fair question. I will say that I have my doubts on it, just on the simple fact that the OEM ECUs that are controlling those transmissions have about 7,000 different tables, and then the Holley system for the controller, you know, has like 4 tables. So just that drastic difference makes me wonder what you're kind of giving up. A lot of the OEM logic can just be redundant and stupid and annoying and have all this extra crap for no reason, but when it comes to that, I feel like maybe they simplified it too much. So it very well might work great. It also might be terrible, and I have no idea. That's definitely one of those things where I'm gonna sit on the sidelines and wait and see what everybody's experience is with some time before I jump into it. Also, I'm not a transmission guy, and the one thing I have learned about the 6L80s and stuff with the OEM ECUs is that for every one person that tunes those transmissions, they will tell you basically that everybody else on the entire planet that tunes them doesn't know what they're doing, and that they're the only person that knows what they're doing. So there's like weird kind of egotistical stuff attached to tuning of those as well. So I know a few people that are pretty good with them, and none of them really do Holley. So I'd be curious to hear their feedback and look at, you know, what's missing essentially from the Holley software, and see if they think that you can get around it. So to go one of 2 ways: either they're going to be like, oh, this is great, this just made my life so much easier, now I don't have to deal with 3/4 of that crap, or they're going to look at it and be like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like 3/4 of the stuff that I like and need to adjust isn't even there. So I'm a little bit with you on that one. I'm curious to hear what the outcome on that's going to be. What brand of turbo do you recommend for a 5.3 stock bottom end? This question was a lot easier to answer several years ago because now it seems like all of the turbos work relatively decent, all things considered. 10 years ago, you bought some of these Chinese turbos, you'd be lucky if you could even start the car without the turbo pouring oil out of it or this, that, the other. So when it comes to the stock bottom end LS stuff, I would say we see 200 to 1. Almost everybody is using VS Racing turbos. And this is primarily just because of budget. So if you're not class racing and you're not limited to a specific turbo size, you can just kind of go with a cheaper turbo, go a little bit larger. Obviously, you're going to be giving up some power band and things of that nature. But like if your goal is to make 800 horsepower, you can, there's an endless amount of cheap turbos that you can buy that'll make 800. On the V8 stuff, it seems that it's either VS Racing, Precision, a little bit of Borg Warner stuff here and there, but that's kind of almost died out because everyone just switched over to VS. And then there's some of the like forced induction stuff. And then now that, I guess since everybody has seen how successful VS has been with these inexpensive turbos that, even Precision's offering cheaper turbos now. I think I just saw, Brian Tooley looks like they're offering some, I'm assuming some cheap Chinese turbos. I haven't really looked into it too much. Garrett doesn't really seem to exist too much on the domestic side of things. We did test like a big money class legal Precision turbo versus a Garrett, kind of like the same thing, and there was couple hundred horsepower difference. So that was an interesting test to do. That was, same day, same car, no changes, literally unbolt the turbo, bolt the other one on and try it. They weren't even close. When it comes to like, if you need to run a specific turbo size, I personally have watched Precision make the most power over any other turbo several different times. And this doesn't mean that there aren't turbos that don't make more power than Precision, but any of the like direct take a turbo off, bolt another turbo on tests that we have done, which has been quite a few of them over the years, Precision has always kind of won that battle. And then Precision also seems to win the award for compressor wheels and exhaust wheels flying out of the turbo and trying to kill people. So a little bit of a give and a take, but at that point, you're talking almost always that's the max effort, run it probably at compressor wheel speeds far faster than what they're supposed to, and they have containment blankets for compressor covers and things like that. But ultimately, I would say you got to pick a horsepower level, and then you got to pick a budget, and usually that will kind of only leave you an option or two. So they all really seem to work pretty good now. And obviously there's going to be a bunch of people that don't agree with what I've said there because they've had different experiences. But almost anytime I recommend anything, it's just because of like the actual experience that I've had, and others very well may have had a different experience. And that's just the way life goes. And that's why you typically will do your research and kind of attack things from multiple different angles before you make a decision. But like the VS Racing turbos are so cheap, I absolutely see why they're so popular. And to this day, I still haven't had a failure on one yet. The very first one that I ever installed, I was super hesitant. The customer just didn't have the budget for anything better. I was like, we could try out one of these things. Everybody seems to be having good luck with them. And to this day, that turbo's still on the car. It still runs 9s on 93 octane. And hell, that customer might have more fun with that car than any of my other customers. So he's super happy with it. All right, this one here. This is too long. Why are people obsessed with Holley Sniper? Just make the thing port injection and be done with it. All right, you said it, not me. But yeah, that's, I probably answer 100 of these emails a week. Guys asking which system I think that they should use. And I think I probably even said this in the last one. Depending on what you're doing, the HP and Dominator ECUs are kind of the highest level. Even if you take the features and the inputs and outputs that the Dominator offers, you take all that stuff aside, like just from a hardware perspective, the HP and Dominator are better. You can run better O2 sensors, you have internal logging, they're potted. There's just 1,000 different reasons why those systems are superior. The Terminator X obviously is kind of next in line, and then we have the Sniper. But me personally, if I'm gonna make the jump from a carburetor to fuel injection, I'm just putting 8 injectors on it, and I'm running one of the ECUs that's going to support that. The simplicity of bolt the Sniper on, hook up 4 wires, and you're kind of up and running, that I see why that is appealing. But by the time you're doing a fuel pump and fuel lines and fuel filters and regulators and all of the other stuff to make it all work, like for me personally, I would just rather spend a couple of extra dollars and convert it to port injection and just have so much more flexibility and control. But I think the Sniper is one of, if not the most popular and most sold EFI systems ever. So with that being said, there's a lot of people that are super happy with it, and there's some people that haven't had quite as good of an experience, but that is my take on it. I agree with you on that one. So just like all the other ones, if you guys have any more questions, leave them in the comments, and I don't know, as long as you guys keep watching these things, I'll keep making them.